So I thought we'd talk about how Conor McGregor became a far-right icon, because of course he is far-right now.
Aren't we all?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everybody is far-right at this point, isn't it? Unless you've got an active Guardian subscription.
I mean, we could literally go through a list. We've got J.K. Rowling.
Yes.
Literally the most left-wing woman on my timeline.
Yes.
Who's also far-right. Yeah.
We've got, I mean, like literally everyone. Conor McGregor. We've got any sports star who isn't entirely on board with the progressive agenda.
Yeah.
It's just far-right.
I'll tell you who never gets accused of being far-right. Anyone in the Tory party.
Well, I mean, that's not true. I do see lots of leftists saying the Tory party are literally fascist and Swella Braverman is the new Enoch Powell.
Well, and then she got sacked.
Yeah, and then she got sacked,
yes.
Yeah. But anyway, so let's begin with what happened. Of course, the stabbing in Dublin from an Algerian immigrant who stabbed 3 children and 2 adults. I believe they all survived, which is good. But of course, this was a deeply shocking thing for the Irish people because this is not the first time this has happened. This was just the worst, it seems, that's happened. And so in the last year, the last 12 months up until April this year, Ireland received 141,000 immigrants.
Wow.
Ireland's got like 6 million people in it.
That's a lot.
The Republic of Ireland, 141,000 immigrants. So that's a massive...
Well, we get about 1 million a year, but then we got a population of about 80 million.
Yeah, but that's massive. I mean, it's still colossal, but like for a small place like Ireland, 141,000 people is staggering. So 14% of the Republic's 5.2 million population are now non-Irish citizens. Staggering. So the Ireland is basically the speed running the English experience of immigration.
Yep.
They've hit the ground running and then it's like, right, we just need to cram as many people into Ireland as possible. Of course, polls in Ireland suggest that 75% of people think this may be too many.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, what do they care about what the people think?
Right, exactly. And so one of the things that the Daily Mail mentions in here is that in a bitter irony, the chap who stopped the Algerian attacker against his children was himself an immigrant. And so they're like, well, I mean, what does this mean? This Brazilian-born...
Well, they've got a 1 in 6 chance at this point.
Well, exactly. Yeah, and it's more concentrated in certain areas like Dublin. So it's going to be a much higher chance. But Caio Benicio, 43, was making a delivery when he witnessed the bloodbath, jumping off his moped and battering the knife-wielding assailant to the ground with his helmet. What a hero, right? But he said the anti-migrant anger which erupted hours later in the riots doesn't make sense because I'm an immigrant myself and I'm the one who helped out. It's like, well, it does make perfect sense, actually.
It does.
Because it turns out that immigrants from Brazil are different, Christian, Catholic country, European, are different from North African Muslim migrants. Immigrant is not just a description that can be applied to any person, because actually you're given a very, very small amount of information about a person if you are to just call them an immigrant.
That's exactly it. It's like the lie of Black History Month. Which Black History Month are we talking about? Because the way you talk about it, it's as though there is one history, as though people from Somalia have got the same history as those from Egypt, who've got the same history as those from who are Aboriginal, for instance. It is itself deeply, deeply racist. And I think that it's done that way, not so that we become more accepting of difference, but so that the difference is put to us much more starkly, so that we then react to it.
Well, it's more of a cudgel, really, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's a cudgel. It's a cudgel, but it's turning everything into an us and them situation. Now, the inevitability about having an us and them situation is that there will be kickback. There's this thing called compensating feedback. They push against us and we push back even more forcefully than they pushed against us, which then creates a cycle of escalation. And that's what's going on. And I don't know why they want it, but they clearly do want it. They want to set them against us. Whoever them is and whoever the us is, they are looking for some kind of race war. They're looking for some kind of sex war. It's like a queer theory war.
Well, they want us fighting amongst ourselves rather than looking in their direction.
Yeah. I think there's that, but I think there are real dangerous elements who want to complete what Charles Manson attempted to kick off with his kaleidoscope thing with the murders of Sharon Tate out in Hollywood in the 1960s.
I have no idea, but I feel like we're slightly getting off topic.
Well, it's not really, because what Charles Manson wanted to do, he committed these brutal killings of Sharon Tate up in the Hollywood Hills. You'll have seen the great Tarantino film.
Yeah.
And what he wanted to do was to blame it on the blacks, on the black community,
Right.
and thereby create a reaction from the white community, so that you ended up with this kaleidoscope of all-out racial warfare.
Right.
And I think that's what's happening now. That we have politicians, we have powers, we have people in the police who want to finish off what Charles Manson started. They want to create a kaleidoscope, and I think it's a horror show.
I actually don't agree. I don't think that they actually want a race war. What they want is to be the managerial regime of mankind. And so to have a group of people who are separate and distinct from the rest of mankind is a repudiation of that. So if we're the international global ruling class, you can't really have the president of the Irish, right?
No.
And so that's the problem. So that's why Ireland needs diversity. That's why Leo Varadkar is like, no, we need to reduce the number of white people in Ireland. We need to increase the number of diversity, because this then homogenizes it into the global order rather than keeping it separate in particular. But we'll come back to this in a second.
Okay.
So as the hero said, well, look, I'm an immigrant, so why is everyone so angry about migrants? And it's, of course, because migrants are different in other places. The person who did the stabbing, for example, is an immigrant. He was from Algeria, and he was arrested earlier this year for possession of a knife. He also previously faced deportation, but eventually received Irish citizenship a decade ago. So he clearly had some kind of history in which the authorities were like, wow, this guy might actually be a bit dangerous. Maybe we should deport him. And instead they're like, yeah, but also, why don't we just give him Irish citizenship so he can't be deported? He was taken to court over the knife incident in May. The Daily Mail understands that he was not convicted due to issues over his mental health, and he was under police guard in hospital. So let's talk about mental health for a second. There's a particular kind of way that the liberal state, the liberal order, views itself as operating, and it tends to pathologize things that are not liberal as mental health issues. As they say here, one source says that it's a real possibility that stabbing is related to a mental health episode. And it could be that he is genuinely unhinged. But the thing is, we're seeing quite a lot of these attacks. And we know from our experience in Britain that actually what is considered to be mental health is often the product of coming from a particular intellectual tradition.
Yep.
That results in terror attacks.
Yeah. And you can dismiss that as a mental health issue if you like, but that does not reduce the fact that it's also a terrorist attack. And it is about just because you're mental or insane doesn't mean that you're not guilty. There's a form of psychopathy which is criminally, you're criminally mad, but you're also fully responsible for your actions. I think slapping the mental illness tag on it, I don't care.
Yeah, well, what they're trying to do is medicalize someone coming from a different paradigm, right?
Yeah.
This person believes things that the liberal state doesn't believe, and so all it can do is call those people insane. We'll get back to that in a minute as well, right? And of course, the police have decided to take no responsibility. The authorities have taken no responsibility for the attack. They deny that the scenes were a proof of failure of policing, and insisted that we could not have anticipated that in response to a terrible crime, the riots would be the response. It's like, right, why not? It seems eminently predictable if you allow a bunch of Muslim migrants over, and some of them, or a very small number of them, do terrible things, that the people already living there will actually be like, well, hang on a second, why are they here?
Yeah.
Why are they allowed to do this?
Well, that's form of madness, isn't it? When you keep repeating the same thing and expecting a different outcome, that's the classic definition of madness. So how the police could possibly look at what's happened the world over and not have expected some form of reaction, some form of backlash, that's a form of insanity. It's a form of insanity, or because it's the belief. I don't think they are insane. I think what it is, it's willful negligence because they've picked a side.
I think it's wishful thinking. I think that's really what it comes down to. Anyway, so we'll move on to some unknown up-and-coming MMA fighter called Conor McGregor, who just happens to have 10 million followers on Twitter. And he points out that, of course, the police are going to blame anyone but themselves. I like this. Zero action. Everything from our lax borders with gravy train benefits to our pitiful mental health services to our country in flames is on your watch, and still no plan of action. Where is our plan of action? What are we going to do to ensure that this stops happening? How are you going to ensure that this ceases to continue in our country? Ireland is fed up of you and your type. We are not stopping here until real change is implemented. We need safety, we need security, we need leadership. We have none of the three. Shame on you and your type. And so when he says your type, he's talking about the metropolitan liberal elite.
Yes. Yeah, I thought so, yeah. Because at first glance, you think, is he talking about the immigrants? But no, he's talking about the ruling elites, isn't he?
He is, absolutely. And he is right that they blame anyone but themselves, because as far as they're concerned, they've arrived at the correct position on governance and on morality. As in, we are the ones who have got this right. And now it is the people who are being governed that are the problem. And this is why they must be molded into the new man.
And anything that doesn't fit has to be explained away as mental illness or an aberration.
Exactly. Now, Conor has been really on this, and this has been wonderful to see. And this is a particularly good one.
Can I just ask, what was it? What are his politics? Because I had no idea what his politics was.
Turns out far right, actually.
Oh, right. Okay.
Well, this is the only thing I've seen of his politics.
I've just never heard him speak on anything like this before.
But he's a patriotic Irishman, which is far right. One of the most horrific crimes this nation has ever seen has occurred. We do not care anymore what you sad cases have got to say. In a war, you are nothing. We are not backing down. We are only warming up. There is no backing down until real change is implemented for the safety of our nation. We are not losing any more of our women and children, sick, twisted people who should not even be in Ireland in the first place. That's a pretty far right statement.
Yep.
Right. Now, that's not a rationalistic statement. That's not the statement of a universal liberal world controller who's going to try and make sure that each group of people are managed down to the most atomized individual. That's to say the Irish, who are the possessors of Ireland, deserve safety and security in their native land.
The only thing I'd add to that is one of the most horrific crimes this nation has ever occurred so far.
There is always that.
The examples of Sweden, for example, will tell you that once this starts happening, it starts happening again.
Oh, yeah.
And again.
We've had that here. He starts then tweeting like a politician. As you can see, he's like, well, I don't condone the riots. I don't condone attacks on the first responders or anything like that. I do understand the frustrations, however, and of course, changes need to be made. In the last month, innocent children stabbed leaving school. Aisling Murphy murdered. 2 Sligo men decapitated. This is not Ireland's future. If they do not act soon with the plan of action to ensure Ireland's safety, I will. Which is very interesting because it kind of implies he's going to have some sort of run at the presidency or prime ministership, whatever they have in Ireland, however they describe it. And okay, well, that would be interesting. Like I said, I don't know anything about his politics. Going just on what he said in the past couple of days, it would seem that he's really far right, which means that he is parochially Irish. Right? Yeah. That's what he's saying. He's not.
But of course, far right today means basically what everybody thought in the 1990s.
Yeah. No, absolutely does. Conor McGregor believes he belongs to a people who come from a place, who have a particular kind of culture, and that deserves to go on into the future. That's Conor McGregor's position, which seems totally reasonable to me, an accurate representation of reality. But of course, this is the opposite of the Prime Minister of Ireland. He obviously goes on about the looting as well, which he disapproves of course. But this is the thing I find most interesting. You've got Leo Varadkar here, who speaks about Emily Hand, who is an Israeli-Irish citizen who was captured by Hamas. God only knows what happened to her in the custody of Hamas, but was also let free in a prisoner exchange. And Varadkar frames it, an innocent child who has been lost has now been found and returned.
Yeah.
A bit monstrous.
It is. Trying to be generous, I wonder whether he was mishandling a famous Catholic sort of trope of lost and found, maybe, but still, he's not a priest; he's a politician.
Yes,
and you would think that he would add he would give the full weight of an innocent child being kidnapped by a terrorist organization.
Yeah,
you would think that he would choose language that reflected that, rather than a little bit like Lassie come home, we've lost our dog, we've lost our kid, whoops, great, they're back again.
But the problem,
you can see how it might be interpreted quite badly.
But the problem with this kind of emotive, judgmental human language is that it stigmatizes one side of the conversation. And if you're the liberal world controller, you are responsible for all of these groups. So he feels as much obligation to Hamas as he does to the Israelis. And if anything, he might be looking at other power differentials and saying, oh, maybe I'm not saying he does support Hamas, but like it makes him want to be less judgmental about either side. And that's why he'll use language that makes it sound like no crime or terror attack was even.
And also, it's a very possible outcome of the current Gaza conflict is that they all end up getting sent to Europe.
Hi, folks. Sorry to interrupt the video, but I just wanted to announce that we have a new line of merch in our merch store. The merch store was kind of empty for a while, and so I thought, right, okay, what do I actually want on shirts? And so I just went through some of the most epic and true things that I think that historical people have said, and John managed to make an amazing set of merch out of it. And we will have extra things coming in the store, such as posters for these to go on. Thanks for everything, folks. Now back to the video.
They don't want to be on record saying anything that is going to make their life more difficult when they announce that 18 months down the road.
Yeah, but as you can see, Conor McGregor is just absolutely handing it to him here. He's not having it. He is absolutely not having it.
But the thing is, the beginning of, I've said this before, I think, on your show, the beginning of wisdom is to call a thing by its proper name. It's an ancient Chinese proverb. Yep. And Conor McGregor is absolutely right. She was abducted by an evil terrorist organization. Yep. That is the bottom line. That is the truth. And then he turns on the state, because it's clearly the state that he's talking to. He says, what are you going to do to protect us? He's not addressing, he's not addressing the immigrants. He's addressing the state. Well, the number one obligation of any state is to protect its people. That is the number one obligation. So if you can't do that, if you can't do that, then you're not fit to govern.
But the problem is that you have a constituency in mind for the Irish state to govern, which is the Irish, right? Leo Varadkar's constituency is not just the Irish. It is also the millions of immigrants who have come in, who are given equal weight in importance, in fact, often more weight in importance than the Irish citizens. Because Conor has a parochial view of, I'm an Irishman, I believe the Irish state is for the Irish. I know these are crazy far-right positions, but Leo Varadkar doesn't agree with that. He believes that the Irish state is for all of the foreigners around the world who want to go and move there as well.
Yeah.
So they're just as important. And so this is something that we've spoken about at length here, which is this is a consequence of liberal ideology. Now, liberal ideology is a rational way of looking at the world rather than a sentimental way of looking at the world. And if you compare that to the way that Conor is talking in a very sentimentalistic way. He's not saying, well, listen, we can sit down and come to a reasonable accord and we'll sit there and discuss all the problems. No, he's being very emotional and saying, no, we have to do something to save lives in the future. Liberalism doesn't approach the world in this way. It has a desire to reductively categorize people, which is why you've got just the catch-all term immigrant that is supposed to at once literally contain Brazilian heroes and Algerian murderers.
Yeah.
That's why, but as an individual, as a very broad category, yes, they are technically immigrants, so that's a box checked on that. And so the point of all of this is to individualize people and reduce them to the single atom that is the individual. That's the person that's been taken out of any context in which they lived, because liberalism conceives of the world in this way. It believes that all humans were once atomized and wandering around the woods on their own, which is, of course, not true. And so the purpose of liberalism, and this is what it's always been about, is to liberate them from the belonging, which are the connections that they have to their own lands, people, and traditions. That's all liberalism has ever tried to do. And it can't do anything else. It is the breaker of bonds. It is the liberator of people from other people. And so this is why liberalism turns into a universal acid. Go and watch all of this content that we've got on lotus.com, £5 a month. We've done absolutely loads and this is why I know this so well. It's the universal acid. So anything, say your obligation to your parents, your obligation to your local community, if those obligations override your personal autonomy, then it's the obligation that has to be broken, not your personal autonomy. That's what liberalism is trying to achieve. And that's what Varadkar is in his heart. We've been debating this extensively as well. This is part 3 of the debate on it. It's been quite intense. And so this is how we arrived at this, which I tweeted out and did very well. If this makes you angry, then you are far right. That's totally true. Because being angry has a few components. There's the person who is hurt, the person who's witnessing it, and the target of the anger. Someone has to be a representative of a constituency with which you are angry. This is why every single time in Britain we get "don't look back in anger." Oh, there's a terror attack, 20 kids got blown up. Don't look back in anger. Because that way you are not morally making a judgment about an entire group of people. No, we've got the guy, he's been arrested, therefore the problem is solved. But of course, that's not the end of the problem. That's trying to isolate it in time and space to this one guy. But actually, everyone knows that is on top of a pyramid of events, of groups, of peoples, of traditions, of strange things that we don't understand that have been brought here. And that the police just think, okay, if we just arrest the guy there, then that's the problem solved. No, this rests on foundations that go a long, long way back.
And isn't it noticeable that nobody was suggesting that Israel go through a "Don't Look Back in Anger" concert?
Yes, the Israelis are allowed to.
Well, they're allowed raving ethno-nationalism.
Yeah, they're allowed to recognize that there are groups of people, and people as representatives of groups of people are morally culpable for what is done by that group. That's what being far right is, right? Being far right is to feel that you belong to a people and feel that other people belong to a people and that you can make judgments about each other. The liberal state can't have that. That undermines and that destroys all of it. But the problem that it has is that almost everyone on earth is far right by this standard. Almost everyone everyone in every country thinks, well, of course I belong to this people or that people, and I have a pride in myself based on that. You know, I'm aware that I, as an Algerian, or I, as an Egyptian, or I, as a Brazilian, or whatever, come from a culture and have been molded in a certain way, and therefore people will make judgments about me, and that I will make judgments about them, and this is
it's utterly unquestioned in the rest of the world.
It's totally
it's
normal.
Just absolute bedrock.
Yeah, but to the liberal state, that's far right ideology. Which it is not, but we'll get into that in a minute. So, as you can see from the BBC reports, and I think this is important, the Republic of Ireland's police chief has blamed the rioting in Dublin city centre on lunatic hooligan faction driven by far-right ideology. So already, the people who are just living in the sort of felt experience of what it is to be an Irishman, to feel collectively under attack, lunatics. Already they're being pathologized, medicalized. The liberal state cannot understand them. These guys are just crazy. It's like, they're not crazy. That's totally normal, right? Because what they're saying is, if this group of people are allowed to remain, future people from our group will be murdered by them, which is entirely possible, right? Yep. And so you would say, right, so a collective action needs to be taken against the group, that particular group, in order to prevent future actions. But of course, the liberal state lives only in the now. And so it's like, nope, we've got the guy. There's literally no further problems and there's nothing more that can be done. But that's not how the rest of the world sees this. And if anyone's got a sense of themselves as a people, it's definitely the Irish. Like if anyone's got it, right, it's definitely the Irish.
And the liberal state doesn't brook any opposition from this agenda at all.
Zero. This agenda.
You cannot vote your way out of this.
Well, you could vote your way out, which wouldn't be liberal, right? You can have an illiberal.
Well, I mean, in this country, people have consistently voted for the most hardline anti-immigration option on the menu for about the last 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, but the Conservatives
on every occasion. Well, both of them, yeah. But it's not like you can vote your way. And even if there was an alternative that arose, they would basically be shut out of the political system, as they are.
But that's not actually a function of voting. That's actually a function of the kind of liberal apparatus that operates around democracy. Like, you could vote for just a far-right party, and a far-right party would be like, okay, we're just going to deport all these people. That's totally plausible. There's nothing stopping it.
Well, having been for a short while the chairman of the political party, the Reclaim Party, I can tell you there are some huge obstacles to get through. For instance, as Nigel Farage found out, just simply getting a bank, just being able to operate as a alternative party. There are obstacles after obstacles.
But my point is, it's not about the mechanism of democracy that is the problem. It's the apparatus around the democracy that fortifies itself, the liberal state, around preventing non-liberal incursion. Is what the issue is, really.
But my point is simple. For whatever reason, voting doesn't seem to be a way out of this. That has not been people's experience. And therefore, when anger reaches a crucial point, it's got nowhere to go but out in this mechanism.
Yes, that's completely true. And yeah, it's the sort of lock that liberalism has on the state. Refuse it.
I think I would say that liberalism, is the way you and I are talking about it right now, is as close to being fulfilling the definition of evil as I can think. And I say that advisedly because I think that anything which runs contrary to our human nature is by definition evil. By definition, when a system tries to knock out the humanity of a people, to knock out their character, to knock out what humans have done for millennia, and replace it with a new liberal type of program, that is, as far as I'm concerned, the definition of evil. Now, on the one hand, that's why it will fail. That's why communism has repeatedly failed, because it tried to get rid of the human in the name of utilitarianism. And it's why this current thing will fail. The trouble is, we're in it right now. And it's very difficult to know whether we're in a 6-year war, a 10-year war, or 100 years. 100 years war. That is the problem. My issue with that is it's absolutely knackering fighting. Yeah. And if you're part of the trenches in that first sort of 10 years of a 100-year war, it feels as though all you've got to look forward to is more and more despair.
That's because that is literally all you have.
That's why I think you have to be optimistic and look at the grander arc of history and go, do you know what? We do win because human nature does not you cannot graft this onto human nature.
I totally agree. This is just a suppression of it. But the point, I just want to pull this out. So lunatic far-right ideology, right? So lunatic we've just covered. Far-right being non-liberal. Right, that's what this means. The reason they call this as far right as you can go. If they thought they were Nazis, they'd say Nazis. Right. If they thought they were fascists, they'd say fascists. They don't have a good way of characterizing what these people believe, because these people, and as they say at the end, ideology. These people aren't operating on an ideology. An ideology is a rational set of beliefs that are constructed a priori before contact with the world. So you get this set of beliefs that you logically slot together, and then you draw conclusions from these premises, and then you act upon these conclusions. That's what an ideology is. It's to justify the seizure of power, right? That's not what's happening here, because they literally don't have a name for it. Every ideology names itself. We are this ism, right? But these people don't have a name for themselves, because what this is just the felt reality of the Irish people, right? This is a kind of animating spirit of human nature rather than any kind of ideology. And this is why they're having such problems just even identifying who is even protesting. Oh, far-right ideology. What does that mean? You don't have one. You don't know what you're talking about. But anyway, so what's the liberal state's response to people like Conor McGregor? Well, it's a hate crime bill. Obviously.
We need another one of them.
Well, funny how these are popping up simultaneously across the Western world.
Well, exactly. And it's all because it's the international liberal order that is doing this. I mean, this is the only way they know how to deal with these people, because these people have opinions which are not liberal, and so they can't be tolerated. They characterize groups of people, which the liberal state can't have. And so, I mean, just a quick thing from this, just a quick extract. We bear responsibility as legislators to do our utmost to provide for a safe, fair, and inclusive country for all, reflecting our modern Ireland. So this is the new plantation of Ireland. So a bunch of foreigners have been brought in, and no, they are going to get increased amount of importance than the existing Irish people. So the existing Irish, even the newest immigrant is as most important as the oldest Irish family in this rendering, right? And they say a hate crime happens when someone commits an offense because they have hatred of a person with a particular personal characteristic. Somehow this is worse than a normal crime. If you murdered someone, okay, but you better not have been a racist about it, right? And when you go through the actual text of it, this shows, like, if they will literally be able to go through your phone and arrest you for the memes that you have there, if they think it's likely to incite hatred or violence against a person on account of their protected characteristics. And so you get people, Spectator, who are like, hang on a second.
But even if you don't show it to anybody, if you just have a meme on your phone.
Yep. Even if it's totally private, it can be done, not in Britain, it's the malicious communications that we do, the Online Communications Act. So in Britain, you have to have shown it to someone else, and you have to have sent it via a public messaging service. So if I said to you something hateful about having a white beard or something, that actually wouldn't necessarily be, I mean, they probably will wrangle it in, but like just saying something isn't sufficient often, right? But in this, it absolutely will be, right? It absolutely will be. But also, you don't have to say it to anyone. It can literally just be on your phone. And so you get people like The Spectator who are like, that's a concern, because that's 5 years in jail, right? That's worse than a lot of rapists will get.
And do, yeah.
So just to
unless, of course, a rapist rapes somebody with a bit of hatred in their heart.
Well, yeah. God forbid that they rape someone with hatred in their heart.
That will just be ignored, though, won't it?
But
I mean, if you say I'm doing this because you're a dirty kuffar, then that will just get stricken from the record.
Yeah.
But the point is, and I realize I'm going long on this segment, but this I think is important. The definition of hate is not actually well defined. The current Justice Minister blithely dismissed any objections or criticism, saying, quote, "We all have an understanding of what hatred means."
No, we don't. Well, we do. We do. But what they've done, if you look at the definition of hate, it includes ill will, ill feeling, dislike. How can it be dislike? How can you say that hate as something that needs to be criminalized can include dislike in there? But worse than that, it also includes antagonism. And this is the important thing. Okay, antagonism. So if you are antagonistic towards an idea, that is prima facie evidence that you are hateful, not only towards the idea, but towards the people who have embraced that idea. And that then becomes the reason for the state, via the police and the courts, to persecute you. Now, I say that this is entirely undemocratic, for one thing. It is most definitely un-British and un-Irish. Because if you think about antagonism, our entire justice system is based upon antagonism. We don't sit around like the French doing a little fact find and working out who's right and who's wrong and who's guilty and who's not. No,
it's literally adversarial.
It's literally adversarial. We've got those who are saying he did it. We've got those who are saying, no, he didn't do it.
Both make your strongest argument.
Absolutely, yeah. Strongest one wins. First past the post, boom. It's entirely antagonistic. If you think about our democracy as well, entirely antagonistic. In the House of Commons, we've got the government benches and we've got the opposition benches, and they are two sword lengths apart. Why? Because the natural reaction of enemies is to scrap and fight and stab one another. That is our first nature. That's our first nature. Now, what the wise people building Parliament did, they go, we can't eradicate people's nature. What we can do is mitigate it. We can't drive out the hatred that there is in the hearts of these politicians, because that would be anti-human. What we can do, we can risk manage it. And so what we will do, we will have a speaker sitting up there on his sack shouting, order, order. We'll make sure there are no weapons in the place. And just in case, we're going to have you two sword lengths apart, just in case that natural hatred, that human emotion of hate spills over. So hate is managed in a mature society. It's not criminalized.
But I would say, actually, I think Carla's laid out quite a good definition of hate during the segment, which is basically the liberal. We can't do it from our perspective, but they can do it very easily from their perspective. They simply say, okay, we're the liberal elite. Do we agree with this? No. Therefore, it's hate.
Yes.
Yeah.
So from their perspective, it's actually incredibly simple.
From their perspective, hatred is the negative characterizing of a group. Any group that can be characterized, if it's done in a negative fashion, that's hate. So it's a very, very, very easy tripwire to walk across. But just to finish this off, because it's been going on long. So what does the liberal state do about a far right patriotic Irishman like Conor McGregor? Well, it creates its hate crime bills and then it investigates him. McGregor's posts are being assessed by the Gardaí, the Irish police, as part of an inquiry into the dissemination of online hate speech. The Assistant Garda Commissioner, Justin Kelly, is doing that. And so he's going to be persecuted by the state because he is a person who lives in the real world.
If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the premium videos, this one on a history of British censorship. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.